Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Getting to Know the Archdiocese. My name is Brandon Schmidt, and we welcome you once again. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Sister Kathleen Schipani. Sister is a sister servant of the Immaculate Heart of Mary and is the director of the Office for Persons with Disabilities and the Deaf Apostolate. Sister, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Great to have you. So we just want to get to a little bit know about you and your ministry. So first of all, let's we want to know who you are really. So where did you grow up, go to school, and really how did you become an I.H.M. sister?
Sure. So I grew up not far from here in St. Louis's in I.H.M. In Delaware County. I went to St. Louis School and then Archbishop Prendergast. And so the roots of my vocation, I guess, are really in three areas. Definitely I've learned, my faith and also generosity from my parents. But I had sisters of the I.H.M. in grade school, and a few of them who had just come back from the missions in South America. So that missionary spirit sort of got into my heart at that time, and I could feel the stirrings of God calling me, which I then did not really make a final decision until I was in high school.
Wonderful. That's an awesome story. And, as your time as an I.H.M. sister so far, what have been some of your past ministries with the order, and really how did you come to be now the director of the Office for Persons with Disabilities?
So one of the formative experiences I had as a teenager was that I worked as a lifeguard at Don Guanella Communities in their summer camp program as a lifeguard, and then I was fascinated by the work with young people and adults with intellectual disabilities, and so I began to work there after school, which I think also influenced my vocation, and I knew that I wanted to in some way serve people with disabilities and, assist in accompanying them to encountering Christ, and also to know God, that they would know God's great love for them. So when I entered the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, first I was a regular ed teacher, usually in the upper grades, junior high, but always I was a catechist, and in most of those catechetical experiences I was forming young people who had disabilities. So I did that in the Diocese of Arlington, and actually it's there that I was sort of drawn into the work of disabilities. The former rector of the seminary, Bishop Welsh, was the pastor and the first bishop of Arlington. And this story I love, he knew me from youth work, and he knew my work at Don Guanella, and he came to me shortly after I arrived to teach in the middle grades, and he said, I have this stack of letters from families who have young people with intellectual disabilities who would like to be formed for the sacraments, and I don't know what to do. Can you help me? And so that really was it was in my heart to do that kind of work, which he knew. And so that's kind of right from the very first mission I had. While I was teaching in regular school, I was also teaching religion to young people with intellectual disabilities. So I was in Arlington, I was in North Carolina, and then in some of the big schools in Northeast Philadelphia, St. William's and St. Martin of Tours. But all of that time, I was also teaching religion to children or young adults who had intellectual disabilities. When I was doing graduate study, I began to pick up sign language. So some of the first people who were deaf that I taught also had intellectual disabilities. And I began using sign language and sort of fell in love with the language, so I pursued it more, and then I was able also to teach religion to young people and adults who were deaf.
That's really cool, Sister. It's a great story. Your office is really dynamic from what we can really tell. You have so many programs which really help people with disabilities. Can you talk a little bit about some of the programs that your office runs?
Sure. So the Office for Persons with Disabilities actually interacts with all our parishes, and so it becomes like a a resource that the parishes have to become more accessible to people with disabilities, whether it be physical, intellectual, or sensory disabilities. And we have parish contacts, so I keep in touch with those parish contacts or advocates, and they actually do the work right within the parishes. So that's like ongoing. The work with the Deaf Apostolate is a regular schedule of Sunday Masses in sign language or interpreted, as well as weekly religious ed in American Sign Language. So our office coordinates that. Then ongoing consultation with the Office of Catechetical Formation so that our religious ed programs are fully accessible to people with disabilities or intellectual disabilities. And then one of my really important ministries is that I co-coordinate with Catholic Social Services Lily's Gift, which is for couples who have a prenatal diagnosis that would either threaten life, short life of their child, or they have a diagnosis of a significant disability. So we have a group of volunteers who are trained and then companion those couples. So that's just a few of the things, but there's probably more.
Sure. No, that's great, really. Love to hear some of those programs. Also, the pandemic has really affected people in so many ways, and of course including people with disabilities. Mm-hmm. What do you think is probably the most challenging or the greatest need for people with disabilities right now, especially in the church?
Sure. Well, people with disabilities belong because of their baptism. They belong as members of the church, but they don't always experience that experience of belonging, particularly if the church is inaccessible or if some simple accommodations that they may need are not accommodated for. For instance, in this pandemic world, so much is happening on video. Just the simple extra step a parish would take to caption their videos would then include their elderly members who are hard of hearing, or their deaf members of the community would have the same access as the rest of the parishioners to that material. So those little accommodations help to indicate that we notice you, you matter, and you belong to our community.
That's wonderful. Wow. In your time as the director, have you seen really progression with better accompaniment with people with disabilities?
Absolutely, I have. Actually, before my time when the office was set up, I understand that only 50% of our parishes were actually physically accessible to people with disabilities. And we're now at about 84% of our parishes are physically accessible. And some of those outliers, in a sense, are really older buildings, and even there, they're making the effort. So that's the physical progress being made to make our parishes more accessible. But the big changes in attitudes, I see. People want to include, they want to learn how to accommodate so that all members of their parish can have access, to the sacraments and access to the life and community within the parish.
That's wonderful. That's great to hear, really. Sister, there might be somebody watching today who thinks, I'd really like to help out, not only you, but the people that you really minister to. What's some ways that, people of the Archdiocese can really help in your ministry?
Sure. Well, I think all parishioners, and it's interesting that you asked that, because the Guidelines for Celebration of the Sacraments for Persons with Disabilities has this beautiful line that indicates that all members of the parish are responsible to promote and foster attitudes that enable people with disabilities to feel and know that they belong. So everyone has that responsibility. So sometimes just noticing a family, particularly, for instance, families who have children with autism or other types of behavioral needs, to be welcoming to them, even though the child might be, a little disturbing during Mass or speak out at the wrong time, to still make that family feel like they're welcome, and not to be saying things that might discourage them from coming back again. That's one way. So it's the attitudes that we have, noticing the people with disabilities and what accommodations they need. But there's also ways to volunteer. You could become the parish contact or advocate connected to our office if your parish doesn't have one. If someone knows sign language, they always become a catechist for children who are deaf or hard of hearing. There's many ways to help. And also, our office, just like parishes, are in need of financial support, and that's an easy way to join this mission in a meaningful way.
Great. Well, I hope many people really step up. That would be wonderful. Sister, in your time as really the director of the Office for Persons with Disabilities, how has your ministry really affected you as a Christian and even as a religious sister?
Sure. I think it's integral to my vocation, the work I do. Our I.H.M. community, our charism is that we would reach out to the most abandoned. And the way St. Alphonsus saw that was the most abandoned, even sometimes by the church. So he, if all the priests were in the city, his Redemptorist fathers would go out into the pastoral areas or the rural areas, or vice versa. And in the past particularly, and sometimes with the deaf community, they are sometimes the most abandoned by the church. So that really emphasizes to me the participation in the heart of the mission of the church to reach out to those who might be at the margins. And secondly, I learn from those I serve, so it's a mutual accompaniment. I see how God acts in their lives, and that inspires me and draws me closer to God.
It's really inspiring. Thank you for sharing, Sister. And thank you for joining us really today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Of course. We hope you'll join us next time on Getting to Know the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.